Welcome to the Holistic High Achiever podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Rohowitz. This podcast is all about thriving in the modern world without sacrificing your health. It's for all of my fellow high achievers, business owners, mompreneurs, and single parents, hustlers, and the people who do so much for everyone else and sometimes at a detriment to their own health. The people who want to do it all, but need to find a better way without burning themselves out or continuing to put their own health on the back burner. Yes, we'll talk about health, nutrition, and movement and easy solutions to living healthier, but we'll also cover topics like goal setting, building habits, and overcoming challenges and limiting beliefs, which can be applied to any area, including health, so that you can thrive holistically. Things will go wrong. They won't always go as planned. And if you're a high achiever, you probably hate hearing that. I hate hearing it. And this is coming from a planner. So while having a plan is essential, because if you don't have a plan for your day, your goals and desires and your life, you're basically just gambling. You're wishing and you're hoping for the best. So even though plans don't always go 100% the way you had hoped to execute them, it is still essential to have one so that you have direction, you know where you're heading. And allowing room for flexibility is also essential. I'm bringing this one up today because I've mentioned before, every time I start working with a new client, we do a deep dive session with them to get clear on their priorities for their health and for their life goals. And then we come up with what I refer to as a roadmap, which is basically a plan for them to help them reach their goals that's customized to whatever their goals are. And then after the first session, everyone's always so happy and motivated and hopeful, and it's this amazing feeling. Then, inevitably, after a few sessions, something will happen that throws them off track. And I've said this to clients hundreds, if not thousands of times. It is not the fact that you got thrown off track. It's simply how quickly you get back on. Whether it's like a simple change in a routine, or you're having company over, or your kid is getting sick. Those of you that follow me on Instagram know that my son was in the ER to get stitches recently. That obviously wasn't planned for. Or maybe it's, and he's okay, by the way. Maybe it's a last minute emergency at work, or just an unexpected snow day or car trouble. Or maybe it's something more prolonged, right? Postpartum, or some other like medical issue or injury that you're dealing with. Torn Achilles, who knows? The list goes on. The possibilities are endless. Here's the thing. Anytime we are thrown out of our routine, everything seems harder because we're creatures of habit and we have this rhythm that works. And the majority of our daily actions and decisions are habits, whether you're conscious of it or not. If we had to consciously make all of the tiny little decisions that we're currently automating, like going to the bathroom and getting dressed and heating something up quickly in the microwave or starting the car, they're not things that take a lot of thought process. Like, yes, you're conscious of the fact that you're doing them, but it's not a skill that requires you to like go through every single detail of the motion. You just go through the motion without really much thought. You just do it. You know, as you get dressed, you're not thinking like, okay, make sure not to put my pants on backwards. My toddler does have to say that, but as us as adults, we don't need to do that. We don't need to think about putting one leg in each slot before we pull them up to fasten them. And oops, I needed to put on underwear first. Like, we have better developed brains and have automated these processes many, many times before. You just go through the motions. So, you know, the same thing with heating food. We throw it in the microwave or the air fryer. And you don't need to ask yourself, is this microwave safe? Unless you're my husband. Just kidding. But seriously, you just throw it in. You grab a utensil, you know, without much thought. You don't think about like, where are the utensils? Unless you're not at home. But you get my point. You start eating. You don't need to put an extreme amount of focus on getting the food into your mouth without spilling. You just do it. So I hope you're getting my point. These are easy examples, but we also have habits and formed actions for bigger things, like packing lunch, getting the car loaded up the night before, going to yoga every Thursday, and doing cardio every Wednesday, eating protein at every meal, and so on. Those are slightly bigger choices. And so some of those may have taken some work initially, but eventually they just become part of what you do without taking up much brain space. You just pack your lunch the night before. It's just become something you do. Or you just start driving to yoga Thursday morning because it's what you do on Thursdays. And so, I just listed some habits that are in alignment with health and life goals. There are also habits that we have that may not be in alignment with your health and life goals. Things like negative self-talk, staying up too late and watching TV, snacking when you're not hungry, all of those things. And so the purpose of today is not to label which habits are good or bad or whether they're alignment with your goals. My intention today is simply to get you to understand how powerful our habits are, because they can dictate how we behave or what decisions we make when life throws a curveball at us and things don't go as planned. Also, the longer we've had a habit, the more ingrained into us, and therefore the harder it can be to break long term, especially in times of higher stress. So if you're someone who tends to self-sabotage as soon as anything doesn't go according to plan, you are not alone. It's actually human nature to default to old habits and patterns as soon as we feel stress. Even if we're conscious of what's happening, we know what we're doing. We know we're self-sabotaging. And often that actually makes it worse because then it's accompanied by guilt and more stress and defeat and annoyance and more negative self-talk. But the good news is the first level of change simply happens by recognizing the pattern. So if you're someone who often falls into this trap or just falls into it more often than you'd like, then keep listening because I'm going to offer some solutions. Here are my 4 steps to adjusting when things aren't going as planned or you're just not happy with how things are going. So take stock is the first one. Well, I'll give you all 4 and then I will go through them. So basically, you're going to take stock, prioritize, take action, and thank yourself. Okay. So when you take stock, you're going to step back. You're going to stay calm because everything is figure-outable. When your brain is solution-oriented, there's not space for wallowing. And I'll go more into depth in this in a second. And then what to prioritize. What is most important right now? What needs to happen? And come up with a plan to make sure those are the things that get prioritized so that you're not just dealing with whatever comes to you, whatever's urgent, what other people's priorities are. And come up with a plan of what you can do or what you can modify or change if you need to. And then take action. And while doing so, this is important. Stay focused on the result or the solution, not the problem. The more energy you give to the problem, the harder it's going to feel. But the more energy you give to the result or the solution, the more motivated and the easier it's going to feel. And just ask yourself, how good will it feel to follow through with the plan I just created? And then thank yourself for being the type of person to still show up even when things are hard or stressful and to do something. So I'm going to give you a small example of a recent personal example. So I have my workouts planned typically at least a month in advance. They're basically the same every week with a few ones that rotate, but depending on my schedule, I sometimes switch off between boxing or power flow yoga. Well, this past Thursday, I woke up with terrible cramps because Aunt Flo decided to show up early, and I had a day full of things, of course, that require a lot of mental focus and presence. So as soon as I woke up, I just knew my day wasn't going to go as planned. So first thing I did is ask my husband to wake up early with our kiddo so that I can take a bath while I center myself and took stock so that I could figure out my day and wait for ibuprofen to kick in. I'm usually the morning person. My husband is a night owl. But he's a great husband and a great dad. So he zombied out of bed and already started doing things the way I would not have done them. But that was my first test to allow for flexibility. So then I started looking through my calendar. to take stock of what was in there and determine what the priorities are for the day. I took stock of how I was feeling, what I was capable of, what I really needed. And then once I prioritized the things that really had to get done, if I could, putting those first, and ideally to start the day if possible, so that to make sure the most important things get done. So there were a few things I moved to next week because they could wait. There were some things I canceled altogether, like boxing, and did not go. And there were a few things I adjusted to make them work. So for example, I had a whole day of content creation scheduled, but after my pelvic injury from delivering a baby, my pubic bone still really hurts to stand while I'm on my period. And so I adjusted a lot of my content to be able to be doing that while sitting. So if you follow me on Instagram, I've already posted a couple of them, but you'll have to watch for my sitting self-care tips. Then I got up, I packed a healthy lunch and a heating pad to take with me to work, and thought about how good it was going to feel to take care of myself and still show up to some capacity. So at least getting the most important things done. I went on to get the content creation done, record some podcast episodes, and stay focused on the priorities that I had allotted for that day, rather than all the things I didn't do or that I wasn't getting done and that I, had planned time for. I was moving at a slower pace, but it felt way better to allow myself to move at a slower pace and rest than it did to push myself when it wasn't time to push. And doing it this way allowed me to feel gratitude for what I was getting done and create a comforting space for my body to rest a little bit more than I'd usually do on a Thursday. There was no space for guilt. There was no space for overwhelm or stress. And seeing how, for most women, this is a curveball that comes up about once a month, I figured it'd be a perfect example to give. So take stock, prioritize, take action, and have gratitude for showing up. So, there are bigger examples. I shared in the beginning of this podcast, I shared my postpartum journey and how I was so stuck and overwhelmed and being so hard on myself for all the things I wasn't doing instead of giving myself credit for all the things I was. And when I finally had an opportunity to step back and really take stock of where I was at in life, what was going on, and what was the most important thing, I realized that just keeping this baby healthy and resting and recovering was the most important thing. And for some reason, I felt like, I should be recovered by now. I should. And that, until I took time to take stock and figure out what was really important, I constantly felt overwhelmed and exhausted. And of course, there are times that all parents will feel this way, whether you have postpartum hormones or injuries or whatever. But all of a sudden, when I took time to assess and put it out there, what I needed to prioritize, it was like giving myself permission to not need to push so hard, especially on the things that weren't a priority right now. And depending on how these episodes air, if you listen to my episode with Amy, she kind of mentioned career transitions. That's another example where you need to take stock of where you're at. If you're in a position or in a job or in a business that you're not happy with, create some space for yourself so that you can be present and take stock and figure out what is actually important right now in today, in this month, in your life. Are you on the right path? And then figure out what you want to actually prioritize so that you can take action and stay focused on the result that you actually want. So that way you're not just taking mindless action. You're not just going through the motions and showing up for work at a job you hate or continuing to push yourself when you're in the middle of postpartum, right? You're taking actions based on something you actually want. And then number 4 is so important, the gratitude for showing up, for being the type of person to show up for yourself. And if you can master this for areas of your life that are likely to throw you some curveballs, especially if it's reoccurring curveballs, you can almost predict the pattern before it begins. So you'll start to have a lot more consistent success rather than feeling like you take 2 steps forward and 1 step back constantly. So that's why I gave period example, because that's something that's going to reoccur. You're going to notice a pattern. So if you catch yourself, anytime we go on vacation or anytime we have company over, if there are patterns that you can kind of predict and plan for, back to those plans, you're going to have a lot more success and then there are the curveballs that, you can't plan for, but the same system can be used. When my kid needed to go to the hospital to get stitches, I immediately canceled my nail appointment and said, I'm not coming. And so if your kid gets sick or something happens, you likely will have to cancel most things and maybe just modify a few. I was actually able to go to the tail end of I had a sister date to get my nails done. And so they were still there by the time we got out of the ER. And I was like, maybe I can get a manicure, even though I missed the pedicure. You might not be that lucky though, but maybe you get some things done, maybe you get none. But the important part is that you're honest about what's the priority. Because if you're a parent and your kid has an emergency, the priority is your kid. And that's an easy one. That's an easy example because every parent is like, well, duh. But there are other examples where things come up at work and you have to go, well, what's really important? Because sometimes it's all important. And you have to prioritize the important tasks. Sometimes, I might have missed work to go to the ER instead of missing a nail appointment. Obviously, work would have been a little bit more important at that moment. The key here is just being honest with yourself about what the priority is and how good it will feel to honor that and not feel like you're being pulled in different directions and feeling guilt that you didn't choose the right things. Because maybe whatever the situation is, maybe the priority is your kid, and simply stating that to give yourself permission to reschedule things without guilt would feel drastically different. And then when you're not focused on all the things you should be doing, you're able to actually focus on comforting and nursing your kiddo back to health. And it just opens up space and ideas for what things you can do to comfort or feel good, like make soup or pop in a movie and snuggle. So my point is, whatever the curveball is, if you take a few moments to assess, it doesn't have to completely derail your health goals. You can actually feel good or at least okay with how you handled it and not feel like you completely self-sabotaged, which will allow you to just get right back on track a lot quicker, thus leading to even more consistent progress. So you're not feeling like you're taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back constantly. There's always going to be curveballs. There's always going to be steps. But the point is, have a plan. Always have a plan, but adjust accordingly. As always, I would love to hear examples of how you use these suggestions or other tricks that work for you. So DM me your thoughts on Instagram. I am at Caitlin Rojo. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for being here with me today on The Holistic High Achiever. I hope today's episode left you feeling inspired and ready to take on the world one healthy step at a time. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, follow, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps so much. And if you're anything like me, you probably thought of someone else who would likely resonate with this. So don't forget to share it with them, because who can't use a little extra motivation? Until next time, keep embracing your journey and kicking ass.